and welcome back to Towards the Moon. I'm Christina Engelhardt, and today we're going to talk about Saturn, a very important planet. And we're going to talk about Saturn in all the signs and going through all the houses, which is very, very important. Let me explain something about Saturn. Many people are very intimidated by Saturn, and rightfully so. It is the great teacher. It is the tester. And in its best, it'll transform your life. And at its most difficult, it'll make you weed out all the unnecessary things in your life. And of course, that can be very, very difficult. So the first thing I'd like to say, Saturn rules discipline, discernment. And when I say discipline, I mean Saturn's purpose is to get you ready for perfection. Because anything that's useless or unnecessary, I like to call it the school of life. Sometimes the master teacher, who's very unfair sometimes, and yet if you have old beliefs, old patterns that are distracting you or taking you off your path, Saturn, when it passes through whatever sign or house, is going to kind of shape you up. Even if you are some of the hardest lessons you are bearing, at the end of it, if you can learn the lesson, you have the great reward. Because Saturn in its own right is rewarding, but not through easy. I like to say Saturn delays but does not deny. So now let's talk about Saturn in the sign of Aries. So we know Aries is ruled by Mars. Now here we have Aries. It is, I should say, at a bit of a struggle with being in Saturn, because Aries is ruled by Mars, wants to step on the gas and wants to go, and Saturn is just the opposite. It's the reins that pulls you back in, and it's slow down, patience, discernment, and really focusing on what you need and slowing you down. And that's the very thing that Aries doesn't know how to do or what to do. Oh, I got a little itch here. Now, if you have Saturn in Aries, my best advice is take your time, learn patience. Probably the hardest thing for you to do, because Aries, go, 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 and Saturn is whoa, whoa, whoa. So when it's well aspected and it's in a trine or such, that Saturn in Aries, at least you will be a dynamo, you'll be a leader, and you know that if you do the work, if you stay focused, you will get to that arrival of position and power that Aries needs so much. If it's at an angular position or afflicted in any way, Saturn will sometimes be very harsh on oneself and very doubtful and very erratic, because again, Saturn wants to slow you down and Aries wants to move you forward. Now let's talk about Saturn in the first house. So the first house, that's how you see yourself. That is the rising, the ascendant, the first house. It is also to do with the time of your birth. So that's what starts the chart. Now, when Saturn is on the first house, now we know that Saturn slows things down. It is about patience. It is about dealing with old, worn-out behaviors. So the first thing is, and if I say that it's your front door, it's like looking in the mirror at yourself, the first house, the first thing you're going to see is Saturn. This is where we have to take ourselves seriously, and we have to not purposely rush. And we might have, the work for sure is on ourselves. And Saturn is get your act together, do the homework. We certainly have now Saturn focusing on behavior, your personal behavior and how you present yourself. Now, if Saturn is well aspected in whatever sign in your first house, if you do the personal work, the exercise, the discipline, the education, it will reward. You can have success. Remember, it is not denied, it's delayed. And usually delayed is meaning you have to go to school, or you have to do your practice, or you have to learn and study. So now let's move on to the next sign. Now we have Saturn in the sign of Taurus. We know Taurus is ruled by Venus, and Saturn in Taurus, well, first of all, we know that Taurus rules the voice and speaking, and Saturn is discipline. So I would say to anyone with Saturn in Taurus, I would say any kind of watch your voice, watch your language, study your voice. You could be a great speaker, great orator, because if you do the discipline of Saturn, this is wonderful. Now, because Taurus also likes values and beauty, it does not deny that you could be very successful with Saturn and Taurus. On the contrary, it's just that the path has to be very direct and you have to do your studies. And sometimes Taurus has a tendency to like luxury and want the luxury before the work. So remember, you can get your goals and your achievements in those values, but you have to work at them. So Saturn in Taurus, well aspected, do the patience, do the work, and you will achieve great success in what you desire. And if it's difficultly aspected, please watch what you're saying. Life will hang on your words, how you present yourself. And that's very, very important. Now let's talk about Saturn in the second house. So if Saturn is in the second house, in whatever sign, so the lessons are going to be, the teaching that is going to be on what you value. The second house is money, values, your possessions. So first of all, it's not going to deny you wealth, but it's going to say you have to graduate. You have to educate yourself. Any worn old beliefs of that, oh, money comes this way or that way, you might have to rethink it. You might change in the middle of your schooling and say, you know what, I'm more aptitude for this kind of learning, and therefore really pay attention to what your desires are, because since the second house is what you value, Saturn is going to teach you that sometimes we might have to shift our old values. And in doing so, we might absolutely open a door for something magical to happen. Now let's talk about Saturn in the sign of Gemini. So Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Now Mercury and Saturn actually do get along. They're friends because Saturn is the teacher, and even Gemini is, which is ruled by Mercury, is the great student, the great curious one. So Saturn in Gemini is actually well fitted. The only thing is that Gemini can be restless and nervous, and Saturn is just the antithesis of that, because Saturn is slowing you down and making you pay attention. So if you're the kind of Gemini, Saturn in Gemini, where you're going to do the extra work, you know that I can focus and study. If you can do that and learn languages and learn communications and learn that is really going to get you far in life, then you'll do very well. If it's afflicted, you will find yourself very, very restless. Saturn in Gemini can be awfully restless. And also with siblings, you might find yourself having siblings that are trying to always tell you what to do, because Saturn is a bit of a disciplinary. So in Gemini rules siblings, you might find yourself maybe, I don't want to say necessarily arguing with your siblings, but somebody's trying to be the bigger brother or the bigger sister, or vice versa, you are. And there might be misunderstandings. But if you focus and learn about how to communicate, the communicative skills, Saturn will serve you wonderfully. Now let's talk about Saturn in the third house. Since Saturn is the teacher and the tester, and the third house is the house of communication, and it's also your early, I would say all the way up until high school, I would say while Saturn in whatever sign is transiting through the third house, this is your incredible opportunity to learn, read, educate, computers, internet. I mean, this is the avenue of information, and Saturn is the great teacher. And also, Saturn is going to immediately weed out the old useless thoughts, because since it is a very thinking house, the third house, and Saturn is a great teacher, it's going to pull out the things, you might be in the middle of a course or a class and you realize this isn't a good fit. Then not to waste time, find out what you're the most acclimated for, and that's when Saturn in the third house and give you the discipline to write it down and do the great writing. I find great writers have a strong Saturn passing through the third house. It's quite interesting there. Now let's talk about Saturn in Cancer. So Cancer is ruled by the moon. Now, whereas Mercury and Saturn are kind of friends, they get along, the moon and Saturn, not so much, because the moon is all your feelings, and Cancer rules the feeling, is the emotional side. And since Saturn can be a disciplinary and kind of tough, you might find that Saturn in Cancer can make you hypersensitive. Or you could feel that nobody's paying attention, nobody's listening. Your relationship with your mother, it always feels like a domineering. Or you feel that, oh my God, every time I tell my kids what to do, I feel domineering. So Saturn in Cancer, if you can work the two out. Now, since Cancer rules the teeth and the digestion and the stomach and nurturing, that you have to do now, pay attention. Saturn, the teacher, Cancer, the nurturer, we can be great teachers. We can be great nurturers, and sometimes it might be seen as a disciplinary. So it does not have to be so much as negative, because if it's well aspected, you can be a great nurturer. You can put a school together. You can organize programs that are to help those in need and emotional needs, even great therapists, because if the moon, which rules Cancer, is tough with Saturn on top of it, then that's the very lesson we need to learn. And because we need to weed out worn out thoughts and thinking, Cancer loves to hold on and cling to old memories in the past. So nothing wrong with remembering the past and holding on, but sometimes if it's holding you back, that's where an afflicted Saturn in Cancer can slow you down. So pay attention to your patterns, especially your emotional patterns. You might be in your own way, and then doing the meditation and the healing actually can make it quite strong. And then you become exalted in the sense of your own feelings become very strong, and that's a good thing. Now let's talk about Saturn in the fourth house. The fourth house is the home of the placement of home, soul, mother, the roots of your being, the nadir part of the lower, the instinctual part of your chart, the midnight side of yourself. Saturn in the fourth house, well, often it is said that when Saturn is in the fourth house, it can rule longevity, because since it's the soul and it is the midnight side, Saturn actually gives longevity. It slows things down. So I would say with anyone with Saturn in the fourth house, it's not a bad place, especially well aspected, because it means that you're going to invest in home. You're going to invest, you're going to do your learning. Now, obviously, when we start off learning something, we might make errors or mistakes, because it is in the learning that we realize, oh, we always learn from the first 2 or 3 mistakes in the first purchasing of a house or a property or anything of the such, even schooling, even nurturing. It gets easier as we do it again. So if you are building a career and you have Saturn in the fourth house, do not be afraid to learn about real estate, brokering, or anything with planting or gardening or structuring. Great for people in horticulture and creating a beautiful garden, landscaping, because the discipline of Saturn and the placement of home works wonderful. Builders, wonderful place, because Saturn likes to build and the fourth house is home. So I think that's a great combination. Now let's move on to Saturn in Leo. Now here's again Saturn, we know, discipline, but Leo is ruled by the sun, which wants to shine, and here it's a little bit of a detriment, because the personality of Leo, shine, 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 and of course Saturn says, whoa, wait a minute, we're not supposed to shine so much so quickly. We got to make really sure what we're good at and that we've practiced, we've educated ourselves, we're committed to what we're going to shine into. So I find that if your Saturn is in Leo, don't be too tough on yourself, but if you're going to be an actor, for example, then you got to go to the best acting school. If you're going to be a performer, go to the best performing school. Whatever you want to shine in, it's not a quick scheme. It has to be really well thought out for the sun shining of Leo to be the most advantageous in Saturn. So even though it's a difficult aspect, you can make it work wonders because you're willing to do the work. And because Leos have a tendency to, what about my ego, my personality? Saturn pulls the reins in, and it makes you really pay attention. Stay away from anything conceited or self-centered, or that you are pessimistic or doubtful, because the positive of Saturn is through practicality, we arrive. So that is a very important aspect of Saturn in Leo. Now let's talk about Saturn in the fifth house. So the fifth house is the house of children, entertainment, love affairs. It's a wonderful house. I truly love the fifth house. Very creative, self-expression. And Saturn, once again, it slows you down so that you learn that we are going to now do the focus and the homework. So often it is said with Saturn, it does not deny, it delays. You usually can have not that many children, or even be an only child, or one child is enough, or a smaller family, because Saturn is slowing you down. And of course, this is the house of children and love affairs. We might have a little bit of a trial and error, or slowing down of maybe we take our time to have children, or we realize, one child is more than enough, or even in your profession, your ideas are very big and shining, but with Saturn there, if you can learn and be structured, Saturn in the 5th house, well aspected, means we could be a great teacher for young people. This is where teenagers and the youthfulness and energy of the 5th house, which naturally rules. So there's this natural serious side of it. But if we are disciplined, discerned in our creativity, we can do very, very well. If it's afflicted, we can waste time, and we could be kind of spread out and really not really showing up with much because we're not willing to spend the time to learn. So remember, Saturn is the great teacher. Now let's move on to Saturn in Virgo. We know that Virgo is ruled by Mercury, and we know that Mercury and Saturn do get along, but now we have where this is actually not a bad combination, because Virgo likes to take things apart and look at the minutiae of things, and Saturn is a great teacher. So I find that when Saturn is in Virgo, these are the great doctors, the people who spend years getting their professor, their accolades, their education, because Virgo wants to look into the microscope of life, wants to assimilate and be of discernment. And Saturn will definitely keep you on board and focused. So actually I find that when Saturn is in Virgo, if you are willing to do the work and willing to be focused, Virgo's a bit of a perfectionist, and Saturn likes to focus on the details. So if you can combine that. Now, as an employer, Saturn in Virgo, you don't allow your employees to have many mistakes because there's a bit of a perfectionist involved. If you are an employee, you will definitely want to prove to your employer you're the right person for the job, because you get all your I's dotted and your T's crossed, and that's actually can be a very good thing. You're your own editor. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now let's talk about Saturn in the 6th house, the house of health, healing, service, work. So when I find that Saturn is in your birth chart or transiting the 6th house in whatever constellation, just the idea that Saturn is in the 6th house. So here we are now, work, what we do for work, taking our work seriously, and being a bit of a healer, and service are all aspects of it. So if Saturn is about focusing, then we're going to focus on our work. Now, sometimes Saturn can be so heavy that it feels like I'm not enjoying my work. Oh God, I have to do this work because I have to pay the bills. So you can have, if you have that mindset that I'm doing this job because it's for the value, for the work's sake, I have to do it. I want to say, let's change the attitude and say that I am doing this work. And you can sometimes go from work to work to work, because these are the workaholics. Then if you're doing a job with Saturn in the 6th house and you're not liking it, then this is when you come home from that job, start learning something new, because you have every right and every reason to do a job or a career, in this sense, your work, that you do enjoy. These are the great teachers. These are the great healers and doctors, because since it's a healing house and Saturn is a great teacher, but it's very work purpose. So I find when Saturn is in the 6th house, we have to really pay attention to, if we're going to put the time into the work, please find the things that are inspiring to you. And it might even be healing. It might even be service, but definitely work and your seriousness towards work. Now, you might find yourself having a tough boss in your job. You might find that, oh my gosh, my employees are saying I'm too tough, if you are in that situation. And one of the things you will learn with Saturn in the 6th house, any old patterns, if you get into a routine at work and you're finding the people around you are not satisfied with it, the only person who can change that is you. So the work that is to be done with Saturn in the 6th house all comes back to oneself. And if you do the work, you'll achieve. Now let's talk about, you're going up the meridian. Now when I say the word meridian, think of the circle, the line. We just did the bottom half of Saturn. Now we're coming above into the 7th house. Saturn is now in Libra. Now here is Saturn exalted. So we know Libra is ruled by Venus. Saturn is exalted because, see, Libra is what we call an intelligent love, because Taurus was also a Venus, but Taurus as it's to the ground. Venus is reaching up to the skies. It's reaching out into the ethics of love. It's why Libras can be very ethical. That's why diplomacy and diplomats are very natural, and lawyers and judges are just natural in the Libra essence, because the scales of balance. So, and Saturn, since it likes to rule and do things correctly, it does very well in the sign of Libra, because its very purpose is to do the right, do the wrong, balancing out. And Libra, since it rules fairness, it works very well with Saturn, because it exactly wants to do the learning to be fair. And this is where diplomacy is wonderfully done. And of course, since Libra also is involved with relationships, it's a very relationship sign because of the nature of Venus. I find that when Saturn is in Libra, your relationships are very, very important. In the right relationship, wow, this is a very powerful side. You will get more done with Saturn in Libra in a healthy relationship. And if anything, it'll help you weed out those relationships that are just not for yourself. So do pay attention with diplomacy and partnership and aligning yourself with others and being fair. That's very important. A well-aspected Saturn in Libra will be very fair. An afflicted one will have to pay attention to those ideas of being fair, of having balance, and that's very, very important, depending on the other planets, how it's affecting. Now let us talk about Saturn in the 7th house. 7th house is the house of relationships, both partnerships and business. This is marriage and how we align ourselves with others. Saturn is serious. Now, I find that sometimes Saturn delays and denies some of the relationships because it slows things down. So I find if either it's in your birth chart, Saturn, or transiting Saturn passing through the 7th house, the relationship is not denied. But if you find yourself, wow, why am I not yet entitled or involved in a relationship? It's because we are trying to make sure our old patterns of relationships, it's not us, the ones that are slowing us down. We have to weed out all the old behaviors that we are having. Saturn is teaching. It's the tester. In the 7th house, it is testing what you need to learn about relationships and what others need to learn about what it is to be in a relationship with you. So it is not denied. And those who receive and are experiencing Saturn in the 7th, don't rush relationships. They will come because you want the right one. When it was in the 5th house, it was about the multitude of relationships, but now in the 7th house, it is about the one, the right partnerships. We took the training wheels off when it was in the 5th house, because now in the 7th house, these are the partners we sign documents for. Now we're going to talk about Saturn in Scorpio. Now we know Scorpio is Mars and Pluto. And of course, Mars wants to go, Pluto wants to change, and Saturn is not so much about changes or transformation. It is about taking a real good focus on what are the lessons learned. So I don't want to say that it's necessarily negative. It is considered a fall because the very nature of Saturn is holding it together, the building blocks, and the very nature of Scorpio is taking it apart and transforming it. Because if it is not strong and reliable, or in Scorpio's nature, truthful enough, then what you're going to have is a very unusual aspect, because Saturn will be the first one to take the Scorpion energy and make sure, because remember, Scorpio, first it's the emotional sign, then it is driven to its passion, and then it rises from the ashes like a phoenix to become spiritual, the eagle or the phoenix. So while Scorpio is transferring, Saturn is saying, okay, if you're in your emotional sign, what's the lesson to learn? If it's in the physical aspect of Scorpio, what's the lesson to learn? And if it's in the spiritual aspect, what's the lesson to learn? And Scorpio doesn't always want all this attention on learning, because it's more about like someone shedding its skin to be free to learn the next. So if you can have this in balance and harmony, a lot can be learned. I find that when Saturn is in Scorpio, these are the great detectives, the great researchers, the great people who look in to take things apart, kind of like what Virgo did, but in a different sense, because Virgo took it apart to look to the little minutiae. When it's in Scorpio, it takes it apart to break it apart. So Saturn wants to hold it together, or at least slow it down, and Scorpio wants to take it apart so the truth can come through. Because funny enough, the energy of Pluto, which is a tinge of what Scorpios need, is really about shifting for the truth to come through. So if your Saturn is in Scorpio and you're the great detective, the truth finder, then you're on your right path. And if it's afflicted, you cannot be in any kind of deceitful or negative aspect of your own personal life or with others, or let that come onto you, because then you will have the skepticism, the doubt, and the disappointments. Now we're going to talk about Saturn in the 8th house. So the 8th house is the house of sex, death, rebirth, transformation, and other people's money. So Saturn, the great teacher, is going to teach us lessons. All of those things I just said. If you're an investor or finance person with Saturn in the 8th house, that's actually quite good, because it's going to teach you about how to work with other people's money. Tax attorneys, or people in finance, they do very well with Saturn in the 8th house, because you're going to learn about maneuvering and taking care of other people's money, even your own investments. Very, very important, your own investments. Saturn in the 8th house, also because it's very sexual, the 8th house, we might find ourselves having to learn the experience, either whoa, sex, we got to figure this one out, or we can't get enough of it. Really what the balance is here, what the lesson is, because it is a great tester. And because it is also the house of transformation and passing, we might need to learn about letting go sometimes, because that is the house. It's a moksha house, the 8th house. It is a dark house, but it is where, when we make the growth and the learning, the transformation, Saturn will support us, because it's a very serious planet. So do not be worried too much about Saturn transiting through the 8th house, but it will make all worn out old patterns of behavior change. So if you are experiencing Saturn transiting the 8th house, you're going to learn how to let go of old worn out things. People, relationships. Might not be fun, but what comes through it will be uplifting. Now let's talk about Saturn in Sagittarius. So we know Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, a big planet, and of course Saturn's the other big planet of the zodiac. Of course, Jupiter always wins out because it's the biggest, but it rules excess. And Sagittarius is the sign of excess because it's such a big thinker, but here again, it rules the higher mind. So Saturn is Sagittarius. If we focus on the higher mind, this is great for professors and teachers and educators, and learning and philosophy and the mystics and the spiritual aspect, because that's what Sagittarius wants. Sagittarius looks deep into why and how and what's the meaning of life. It's necessary. In Sagittarius, as it is the curious one, Saturn supports it because it wants to learn. Now, anything extravagant, as I say, too extravagant, which can be a Sagittarius, great bountiful joyfulness, Saturn will kind of pull the reins in and curb that, trying not to let you be jack of all trades and master of none. The Saturn will actually help you find that ability to stay put. You might have to go through several different careers, but Saturn is going to get the Sagittarius person to really focus and learn those lessons. So, of course, Sagittarius kind of likes to go and run forward, and Saturn is like, wait, hold on, where are we going? What are we doing? What's the path? So I'm not worried too much of Saturn being in Sagittarius, but do not underestimate the need to learn and to rethink about how you are showing up. And if anything, Saturn will put the Sagittarius on an emotional, spiritual, and physical diet. So we are assessing what we do, and we're thinking of the bigger picture, but step by step. Now let's talk about Saturn in the 9th house. The 9th house is the house of education, foreign language, foreign cultures. It is the house of travel and what's overseas and what's outside into the outer world. It's a wonderful house. It's education, publication. I like the 9th house. Saturn there, the great teacher. So here, once again, when Saturn was in the 8th house, as we know, Saturn is now coming up passing through all the top of the chart. And Saturn likes to be in the ninth house. In the eighth house, there was a lot of shifting and changing, but once Saturn gets to the ninth house in transiting, it is now taking things more seriously. It is now what you let go of in the eighth house. Now it's now grounding itself, and it's saying, okay, here I can learn something that is useful. And if you have Saturn in the ninth house, your ability to stay focused in your spiritual discipline, this will be very good for you. You might find that you're not necessarily going out into the world because it slows you down, your education, but you're certainly going to take the books, open them up. You're going to learn about cultures. This is very important. You're going to learn about languages. You're going to be interested in these things. Saturn likes to be in the ninth, and as it continues on, traveling to the top of the chart, you will find a well-aspected Saturn in the ninth. You will take your time learning because you will get the rewards of it. Because Saturn, even though it slows things down, it does not deny the rewards of hard work. If it's difficultly aspected, you might feel that you're constantly in a rut and people are saying, no, no, no. It's not the N-O of the no, it's the K-N-O-W. It's the know of knowledge. And so Saturn does very well in the ninth house because your hunger for knowledge is unlimited. Now let's move on to Saturn in Capricorn. Now it's in its rulership sign. Saturn is well aspected in Capricorn, but it's the tester and the testing because Capricorn is very serious and Saturn is very serious. So we have, but I mean it in a good way because in its own rulership, Saturn has the staying power. Capricorn has staying power and Saturn too, so it's well combined. So we have sometimes seemingly a serious-minded person because wherever your Saturn in Capricorn is in your chart, it's going to focus. You're going to be able to do the work. And there'll be some times where there'll be a part of you that'll say, well, you know, I might like to go out, but I know I need to stay home and study. I know I need to do the work and follow through. Because from the waist up, Capricorn is the goat that wants to climb to the mountain and achieve, and Saturn loves to achieve. And from the waist down, Capricorn is the goat, wants to go down to the bottom of the emotions. And sometimes Saturn is, what? Emotions? We have to feel now? But if anything, if you can balance being Capricorn with Saturn, if you can balance your feelings and you're ambitious, you'll do very well because that's being in harmony. And Saturn ultimately wants to be in harmony because it teaches you about yourself and it does reward the hard work. Now let's talk about Saturn in the 10th house, its favorite house, its natural rulership house. Of course, 10th house is career, honor, father, prestige, reputation. Saturn in the 10th house is all about reputation. This is where the honor, the accolades, your hard work pays off. Saturn's natural best place to be. It's when I say it is at the noon, at the top of the chart. That's what the midheaven, the 10th house, is at that pinnacle, and Saturn there. This is where we get to shine, but through respect, through our accolades, through our career. Here is where we've done the hard work. I usually find when Saturn is well aspected in the 10th house, your career is meaningful. It is what, basically, it's not just that your husband, wife, mother, father, whatever, it's your career. You will definitely be professional, or you'll see yourself in a professional sense. And I find great leaders have Saturn or strong Saturnian energy in the 10th house. They have the staying power to get through the difficulties of what it is to be successful in whatever career. It is also father house. This is the masculine energy. Opposite would be the 4th house, the feminine energy. But Saturn does very well. So your relationship with your father, your relationship with your mentors, very good for mentor. Being a mentor and having mentors, that's wonderful with Saturn in the 10th house. Now, it could be a difficultly aspected 10th house, but if anything, if you're willing to do the hard work, because that's what Saturn's serious side is, you can accomplish a lot. And I always say, if it's transiting through the 10th house, now is the time to really get all the old patterns of your career or the things that you were repeating. You're like, gee, I'm not getting this career or launching, wonder why Saturn is here. Well, then we might have to take a look and say, well, here we're wasteful. Here we're spending money. We don't need this. We got a clean house. And then with a clean house, or clean career in the sense that we can then move forward. Now, it also rules government. So we will learn a lot about what the government needs in our life, because Saturn is government. 10th house has got a government feel. It is the ruler of of guiding us to our things. So we're going to really pay attention, and we might find ourselves getting involved in government, or at least learning about it. So that's something I needed to mention about the 10th house. Now let us move on to Saturn in Aquarius. Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, the changeable, non-conforming, independent, I can do it my way, and it's like a wild stallion. It wants to move and charge forward. Fabulous. It rules the higher octave of the mind. These are where inventive, creative ideas. And funny enough, because it's not difficultly aspected, because Uranus is inventive, and Saturn, as the great teacher, loves to have invention, loves to be creative. But the non-conforming aspect of Uranus sometimes might make you a little nervous. And I'll say that because the Aquarius is a bit impulsive. It wants to do things now in its own way, and Saturn sometimes wants to go by the book and by the rules. So you might have to break the rule, but you have to learn them first. So learn the rule before you break them, as I say to my Saturn in Aquarius. Learn it so you can create something new. And it can be very interesting. So I find great inventors have Saturn in Aquarius, because they say, wait a minute, I've done it this way 100 times, it's not working, let me do it this way. And therefore we've actually created something. So it's very interesting, and I find heads of CEOs and corporations, because there is where, remember, the people who went from the mailroom to the CEOs, they had to be original, and Saturn was the discipline to get them through that phase. So if you have Saturn in Aquarius and you're willing to be inventive, but follow the rules of the next, so that you can finely tune yourself. It's like a fine-tuned clock. You're willing to create new inventions, but through the idea of taking and doing the learning. So now let us talk about Saturn in the 11th house. The 11th house of hopes, wishes, dreams, goals, and friends. So Saturn runs a bit on the serious side. It likes to be in the 11th house. So our friends, we might be, I would say, we might find ourselves, I don't want to say necessarily controlled, but we might find ourselves being authoritarian to our friends, or some of our friends are telling us what to do or guiding us. Now, nothing wrong with that, because Saturn, the great teacher, friends, we might find ourselves working with organizations, because the 11th house works with groups of people, like our friends. We might make friends not so easy, because we're looking for the qualities, because Saturn is the great tester, is the great perfectionist, and there is no such thing as perfect of anything. But Saturn will be the one doing so. And when it comes to being in the 11th house of hopes, wishes, friends, and dreams, Saturn will be the one teaching us, what does it mean to have a great friend? What does it mean of being a good friend? What does it mean to have our goals? Goals don't just come by thinking them, because an afflicted Saturn in the 11th house is great dreams, thinking, but we got to get the feet on the ground. We got to make the motion to have it. So when Saturn is in the 11th house and you're doing the work and you're building through your friends, through committees, through organizations, you'll find that you can do very, very well. There's nothing wrong. And actually the 11th house could do very well with Saturn there, because it definitely gives you structure. Now we're going to talk about the last sign, about Saturn in Pisces. Now, Neptune is the ruler of Pisces, and Neptune is nebulous, like a fog, and I like to say Saturn is like a block of cement. It holds you down, or the anchor that grounds you, or keeps you afloat and still. So here we have Neptune, nebulous, and Saturn, the teacher. Now, if we can turn this into great compassion, we learn, we teach through compassion, because Pisces, the great compassionate nature, is not happy so necessarily about Saturn, but man, if we can have the ability of focusing on our compassion and making that resonate through the world, that's actually a wonderful thing. Then we have Saturn in Pisces. This is the generation of also, because Saturn every 2.5 years changes. When it's in the 2.5 years of being in Pisces, these are the people that are going to say, wait a minute, let's really take a look about our compassionate nature. How are we expressing ourselves? Are we too tough on the world? So it's going to definitely examine where our compassionate nature is. Also, you have to remember, Pisces rules illusion delusion. Well, Saturn isn't going to allow that. Saturn's going to weed through what's real and what's not real. And also, Pisces rules service or suffering. So I say, if your Saturn is in Pisces, you need to learn about where you can serve in the world. Because if you do, you don't have to suffer through it, because you've now created it through service. And whatever way it is, it could be helping a child, it could be helping animals, it could be helping nature, it could be even learning music, because music's a great healer. Because Saturn disciplines and Pisces wants to heal. So if we learn the laws and the spiritual laws and religious laws and fundamental laws of our spiritual nature, this is where we can serve and we can have the great healing. Great healing can come with Saturn in Pisces. Now let us talk about Saturn in the last house. Saturn now, we know the 12th house is the house of ultimate understanding and healing. But I say healing through our karma, through our lessons. Saturn, the teacher of lessons, and the 12th house is the house of learning our lessons. So if Saturn is there in your birth chart, natally, from the time of your birth, or transiting, Saturn in the 12th house will make you, as they say, clean the decks, so that you can clean, especially old patterns. If you had a family member repeating a behavior, you're the one who can change it. If you have Saturn and you're finding parts of your behavior, or you're repeating something, Saturn in the 12th house is going to make you stop that behavior and really take a look at yourself. And this is where meditation, this is where philosophy, this is where therapy, this is where thesis and studying the nature of your very essence of your behavior. And this is where great charity can come through. And nothing can get us through that like Saturn. So it's not necessarily negative, but it will be. You have to sometimes separate yourself. It might feel isolated. It might feel lonely, because that's how you study. That's how you learn. That's how you learn about yourself. Saturn passing, transiting, or natal through the 12th house. The biggest test of your life is learning about yourself and the deepest essence of your spiritual nature. And this is where the biggest growth is, the freedom of your spirit. So ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for letting me help you understand Saturn in all the different houses and all different signs. And don't forget to look towards the moon. And I look forward to seeing you very soon.